their bodies down on a bloody war and liberty for their descendants. Thanks to the renegades, we're free today. Thanks to the renegades, we're free today. Thank God for the renegades and the lives they lead are ahead of their time. Without the renegades, Lord knows where we'd be. When it comes to heroes, renegades are mine.
I'm David Knight. We're going to talk to a former sheriff, somebody who has walked the walk, has stood up for the Second Amendment at the all the way to the Supreme Court and won. And he is now running for Congress in Arizona. We're talking about Sheriff Richard Mack. If you want to follow his campaign, help him, you can find him. His website is sheriffrichardmack.com, and you can also find him on Twitter at Sheriff Mack. And just to give you a little bit of background, he was in Arizona, Graham County, Arizona. He was a sheriff there. He was nationally recognized for his participation in a landmark 1997 case, Mack versus United States. It was a group of county sheriffs who challenged constitutionality of provisions in the Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act, because there is a separation of powers. If we don't have people in Washington who really recognize that at the moment, that's why we need more people who do. And so now joining us is Sheriff Richard Mack. Thank you for joining us, Sheriff Mack.
Well, David, thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be back with you. It's like coming home after a while, I guess. We haven't seen you in a while, but thank you so much.
Well, tell us a little bit about what's going on in your run for Congress right now, and then I want to ask you some questions about the current gun debate. You can speak to the people as to why the Second Amendment is important, why local law enforcement is important, because we keep seeing every problem being pushed to the national level, and that includes law enforcement. But tell us a little bit about your congressional campaign right now. What stage are you in?
Well, first of all, a lot of you may have seen the scandals that were going on in the country. One of our congressmen here, I thought one of the better ones, Trent Franks, abruptly resigned. And the the governor called a special election here in the state, and it's 1 week from tomorrow. We've had a very short window to get prepared for this campaign. But the reason that I really have a chance to win this is because there's so many mainstream candidates running. There's 4 different legislators or former legislators from the state of Arizona, and they're all pretty much mainstream establishment candidates. And so it really is an opportunity for somebody as conservative and constitutional as I am to win this. If
yes, usually kind of the other way around. Usually there's like one mainstream guy that they handpick and groom because this is a special election, so that kind of flipped things upside down. So usually there's one guy that's the establishment guy, and then all the constitutionalists, the libertarians, conservatives all run and divide the rest of the vote, so that guy always wins. But now we got an opportunity going the other way around.
It is, and if I was just running against one of them or 2 of them, I don't really believe I'd have much of a chance. But because there's 4, and then there's 12 people on the ballot, there's really 5 people that have a chance to win. The 4 mainstreamers and myself. And the thing of it is that I said all along, if I could raise some money and compete with them financially and get the TV ads and the radio ads, and the signs and bumper stickers and everything else that you need to run a campaign. We've really had a lot of good volunteers, too. If it hadn't been for the volunteers, I wouldn't have got enough signatures. Here in Arizona, you have to have signatures, and we got over 2,000, which put us in second place of the 12 candidates. Wow. And so we do have a lot going on for us, but I will tell you, this last week, we're trying to saturate the airwaves with radio ads to really wake people up to the situation that we're faced with here in Arizona and in our country. And there's one of the mainstream candidates that has tried to steal my thunder. Her name's Lesko, and she actually has on all of her signs all over the place. She has over 1,000 signs up, and she calls herself a constitutional conservative. nothing could be further from the truth. It's just political choreography on her part, trying to convince people, and especially the conservatives and the Tea Party groups in this district, because it is a very conservative district. And she's trying to convince them that she's actually constitutional. Well, she spent about 10 years in the state legislature, and you can't point at one thing that was really constitutional. I'm sure she was. I'm sure she was for the Second Amendment, and she claims to be that. And she never voted for gun control. But still, she wouldn't know the Constitution if it hit her in the head. But yeah, she's campaigning on that.
Well, you certainly do. And you have gone all the way to the Supreme Court to defend and to win, defending both the Second Amendment and the 10th Amendment, because that's a big part of why you went there, to say we have to have local law enforcement. It's very important to have local law enforcement, and it's also very important to have the Second Amendment as well.
Of course. And let me add something right there. You're right on target. You ask me why I run. People have been asking me that. It's the same reason I filed a lawsuit against the Clinton administration back 20 years ago. I'm running for the same reason, liberty. And you know what? I just got an endorsement about 10 days ago from the RLC. That's the Republican Liberty Caucus.
Yeah,
and David, they have one criteria for endorsing a candidate. And out of the 12, I got their endorsement. Their criteria: do you have a record, a solid track record for standing for liberty and the Constitution? Not a promise, not political jive.
That's right.
A track record, something that's tangible and viewable and palpable. And that's why I got it. And it's been a huge boost to my campaign.
Well, that's great. You certainly have walked the walk, and you certainly have fought, and that's why I want to have you on, because a lot of people have forgotten what happened 20 years ago. They've forgotten the real threat to the Second Amendment, but that's coming up again. And you fought that with other sheriffs. You took it all the way to the Supreme Court. You won at that point in time. But talk to us a little bit about how you view the current gun debate post the shooting in Parkland, Florida.
Well, this happens every shooting, and I think we've got to ask ourselves why these shootings are occurring. And to be so simplistic and to blame guns is really nonsense. I mean, there's only two ways to go here. You can have complete gun confiscation, because this whole thing about getting rid of the mean guns, let's get rid of the AR-15s. Okay, so next time the lunatic thug loner who shoots up a school or kills at a school and commits these heinous murders, then he's going to use nice guns.
Yeah.
If you get shot with a nice gun or a mean gun, it's still going to cause death and mayhem. And it is such a ridiculous argument. And so the only other alternative is, if we can't get rid of 350 million guns in America, which is logistically impossible. It's not going to happen. Even if it was lawful, which it is not, it's not going to happen. And so people finding solace and comfort in the idea of creating more gun control is just idiotic. It's not going to happen.
Well, it's the same thing that we've seen on the right in terms of drugs. We understand how drugs have destroyed lives and everything. So let's just make them go away by prohibiting them. And of course, that didn't work. And the same thing it's not going to work for the same reasons with guns. We're going to have, it's going to be totally ineffective, but it will increase crime. It will increase the lethality of these weapons, and we have seen that from experience. So we've got to take a quick break, Sheriff Mack. We're going to be right back. We're talking to Sheriff Mack. You can find him, sheriffrichardmack.com. Very important to support candidates who stand for the Constitution and really have done it. Not just swearing in ceremonies, but really supporting the Constitution with their actions, as Sheriff Mack did. We'll be right back. I'm David Knight. Welcome back. I'm David Knight, and we're talking to Sheriff Mack. We have a rare opportunity where a special election has created a quick special election opportunity has created a situation where we've got a large field that is divided by establishment candidates, and it gives us an opportunity for a real constitutionalist, somebody who has fought for the Constitution, somebody who is a libertarian, a chance to come in. And as Sheriff Mack pointed out in the last segment, he's been given the endorsement by the Republican Liberty Caucus because he has actually done things to defend the Constitution, not just say that he will uphold the Constitution, as everybody does when they take the oath of office. That's easy enough to do. but he has actually walked the walk. He pushed back against the Clintons, against the Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act. He fought it all the way to the Supreme Court to defend the Second Amendment, the 10th Amendment, and now he is running for Congress, and this election is very close. Sheriff Mack, tell people where they can go to support your campaign in these final days here.
Yes, really could use all the support there. It's all going to go into our radio ads last week. Again, the election is February 27th, 1 week from tomorrow. So we're really going to push this, and I'm hoping everybody will get behind me and help make this last week's push. So we really need your financial support big time. And it's all, you can do it all right at sheriffrichardmack.com.
All right, great. They can go there.
Sheriffrichardmack.com. All
right, great. And again, your Twitter handle is Sheriff Mack. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to give him the Twitter handle, but go ahead. I'll give the floor to you.
Well, one other point I wanted to make is I'm actually a school teacher. I don't know if you and Alex know that, but I teach high school. Know that. I teach government and constitution government and criminal justice. And the thing that they teach us to do, if there's a drill, when we do our drills for an emergency situation, they teach us to pile up all the kids in the corner. And
that's effective.
I know. And so, some of the kids really are against that. They said, well, you're just making us targets and an easy shot. And so the point that I was making about we can't get rid of 350 million guns. Well, on the other hand, let's follow some common sense and let's shoot back when this happens.
Yes.
Grady Judd from Florida actually said that we should get former law enforcement, such as myself, and we have former military in our school also, who is actually better trained than I am, and we have other people that are really into guns and training and would be wonderful in defending our school because Sheriff Judd told the truth, and I'm going to tell the truth also. The average response time is 5 to 10 minutes for police officers to arrive at such situations that just happened in Florida. A lot of people can be murdered in 5 minutes, and I mean hundreds can be murdered in 5 minutes. Luckily, we've kept it down, but usually it's just because the guy, the shooter, the thug, the murderer is reloading or, had some other complications with his weapon. This is something that all the schools in this country, governments, sheriffs have got to start to address. And I applaud Sheriff Judd, who's one of our good constitutional sheriffs down there in Florida. Fantastic way to go.
And I'm looking at his comments here. Polk County Sheriff Grady Judd, and he said this particular shooting in Broward County only took 3 minutes. And he contrasts that, as you just pointed out, to the typical response of police 5 to 10 minutes. So it's typically finished at that point. That's what we saw with the Texas church shooting here. They got there as quickly as they could, but it was a guy on the ground. I have all these people writing back to me, oh, that didn't happen. He didn't stop the shooting. Yes, he did. Yes, he did stop the shooting. And so it's, but they cannot have a narrative go out where you have a responsible person who is a former NRA instructor, a person having the same gun as the killer, stopping the shooting. That cannot be allowed to have that narrative out there. But I would ask you, so with the gun-free zone laws that were put in by Senator Joe Biden, you then are not allowed to carry a weapon in the school. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, that's
a great idea.
We've got to work to get that changed, and maybe the schools or maybe Arizona could nullify that idiocy from Biden and just start arming our schools. And let's let all these thugs know if you come into our school, somebody's going to shoot back.
And it's more effective. I mean, here's a situation where you're teaching school, a former sheriff, and as you point out, former members of the military, highly trained individuals. You could all be vetted by people who say, yeah, we're constantly looking at these people, and we still know that they're solid and mentally sound and so forth and highly trained, and we let them have these weapons, and then you're not going to be a target for a particular shooter who comes in because they're not going to know who's got the guns. So they're not going to see somebody in a uniform. They take that person out, and now you're back to a situation where there's nobody there to protect the crowd. It's very important to do that. And, of course, we've also had Sheriff David Clark say the same thing. He said, look, we'll get there as soon as we can, but it's your duty to arm yourself and to figure out, to train yourself how to protect yourself and your family until the police can get there, to at least delay situations, to protect some innocent lives, even if they can get the first shots off.
Exactly, and let's also give a shout out to the Second Amendment. I teach the children in my school, and I've told them I will never lie to them. I've told the people in this election I will never lie, and so the truth of the matter is the Second Amendment guarantees that your right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, and it means this: gun control in the United States of America is against the law. And it doesn't matter what kind of statistics you can show that they're about gun violence. The law is the law, and it's there for a reason. And I totally support the law, and it allows for the American citizen to feel comfortable that government's only role regarding my right to keep and bear arms is to guarantee that my right is never infringed. That's their only role in this, and
because
people are forgetting that.
That's right, because it is their only role is to protect our rights and our liberties, and that's a God-given right that is recognized in the Constitution. But of course, as we see yesterday, we had an attack. It was a Muslim against people at a Christian church in Russia. Nobody talked about that. Had 5 women killed. He was stopped by individuals with guns who took out that guy. But we have to have the narrative that only in America do we have guns, and so only in America do we have innocent people shot. And at the same time, yesterday, we've got Turkey summoning the Dutch diplomat over the fact that the Netherlands were going to have a statement about the Armenian genocide. And what we don't have in this country, and certainly haven't had as of yet, is a genocide like we've seen in Hitler's Germany or Stalin's Russia or Mao's China or in the Turkish situation, because that's a key part of why we have the Second Amendment. We want to be able to protect ourselves against lunatics as well as against lunatics in government, lunatic tyrants. That's the real means of the defense against that is the Second Amendment.
It is, and thank goodness that we do have it. And there's another key principle there. We, the people, call the shots. We bestow all power. If we don't have the right to keep and bear arms, we cannot bestow that upon government officials. And so the key component of all of that, I'll finish with what I require my students to memorize. And it's these 10 words: that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. And so every one of my students have to say that for the final. They have to write that down, or they have to quote it to me as part of the oral examination on our finals. And I think every American needs to get back to these basic fundamentals and stop finding ways to compromise or negate or nullify our Constitution. Even if they got rid of the Second Amendment, I still have a right to keep and bear arms because I was born with that right. No man can take that right away from me.
That's right. As they go on to say in the Declaration of Independence that you're quoting, if the government becomes destructive of these rights, then it is the right and the duty of the people to alter or abolish that government. So we hope that we can alter it so that it respects our rights. We're going to be back. We've got one more segment with Sheriff Mack. We got to take a quick break here. And again, it's very imperative that you support Sheriff Mack. He's got a special election that is coming up just 1 week from tomorrow. It's an opportunity because with this special election coming up very rapidly, the establishment didn't have time to push everybody out except for one candidate. So it's kind of the opposite of what we typically see in an election. We've got a divided field with the establishment, and we've got one constitutional candidate, one person who's going to support individual liberty, and that's Sheriff Mack. So we'll be right back, sheriffrichardmack.com. Welcome back. I'm David Knight, and we're talking to Sheriff Mack. I didn't realize that he was in a special election, and it's just a week from tomorrow. This is a great opportunity because it is a heavily divided field, divided amongst establishment candidates. Sheriff Mack is the Republican Liberty Caucus candidate in that special election because he not only says he supports the Constitution, he has supported the Constitution. 20 years ago, he went all the way to the Supreme Court, fought and won to support the Second Amendment and the 10th Amendment against President Clinton's Brady Handgun Act. And so now we have a chance to send him to the Congress. You think we ought to have somebody like that in Congress? I do. So we're going to ask him in this next segment. We got one more with him. I want to ask him what other issues besides the Second Amendment, because we've been talking about that. That's at the front of everybody's mind right now after this shooting. But I want to talk to him about what other priorities he has there. Real quick, I want to let you know about a couple of the product sales that we have at InfoWarsStore.com, because that's what supports this program. We have all of our Super Blue products 50% off. And again, that's our toothpaste, mouthwash, no fluoride, but it has iodine as well as silver. So that fights the bacteria that creates gum disease, that leads to tooth loss, that creates heart disease, and so forth. You can find all the Super Blue products 50% off. Also, Pollen Block, a fast-acting seasonal distress support, help you fight back against pollen and take control of your sinuses. You can find that at 50% off. Take a look at the other sales we have. We've got a lot of sales of items that are up to 50% off at InfoWarsStore.com, and we really do appreciate your support. All right, let's go back to Sheriff Mack. Sheriff, tell us some of the other issues besides the Second Amendment that is on your radar, some specifics that you're campaigning on.
Well, specifically, it's the freedom issues, but it's one of the government abuse that keeps happening in our country. The innocents in prison, the Bundy situation,
yes.
That these people were kidnapped and taken away from their families for 2 years from some evil judges. And who's talking about making sure that never happens again? Mm-hmm. No one except me.
That's right.
In fact, no one across the country that has anything to do with running for any office is talking about that.
Isn't that interesting how silent they've been about that process when it parallels what's going on against the president right now? And we still have, like Ross Ulbricht, it was a different issue. It wasn't land use issues, but it was being able to buy things anonymously on the internet. So he was sent multiple life sentences. The parallels to the Bundy case are absolutely amazing, except that there wasn't a whistleblower like there was in the Bundy case. And they got away with it in his case, Ross Ulbricht and Silk Road.
Well, they almost got away with it with the Bundys, except it became so blatant and obvious that Judge Navarro had to change her tune. She was acting like a prosecutor until this all came to light, and then she threw the prosecutors under the bus and threw the case out, which should have happened a long time ago. She knew this information before. In fact, she was siding with the prosecutors with all of their quote, prosecutorial misconduct. Was she
not only in that case, but in the previous 2 trials of some of the other people that were there at the Bundy standoff? They'd already had 2 other trials. A couple of people have been convicted of some charges. Those need to be overturned. Those people need to be released. But yeah, you're correct. In 2 trials previous, and in this trial, up until the point we got Larry Wooten of the BLM, until that surfaced and he blew the whistle on that corruption, then she couldn't do anything about it. She was either going to go down with them or throw them under the bus.
And the CSPOA, my constitutional sheriff's organization, actually put up a new website about all of this, and it's called thefreedomcoalition.com. And it's something we've been working on for over a year and a half now. Amish farmer Sam Gerard, who's been put in prison for 6 years because he made a salve out of chickweed. And the judge, I went to his sentencing, and the judge said that he was too obstinate, so he's given him 6 years. And he didn't register. He didn't register with the FDA, so he gets 6 years in prison. The judge, knowing full well that he's not a criminal, that he didn't commit any crimes. What we have here is federal bureaucracies creating criminals out of law-abiding Americans. And if we keep allowing this to happen, then we go back to your analogy earlier of Stalin and Lenin and Hitler that put their political enemies in prison. They either killed them or just locked them up. We're doing that now. And these are all leftovers from the Obama administration. And there's no way that President Trump or anybody else can drain the swamp without addressing this and getting these innocent people out of prison. And that's another thing that I am running on to do exactly that.
And I'm sure that also the Hammonds, who are now in jail simply because they set a small tiny backfire to protect their property from a wildfire that was going across public lands. And of course, the BLM was also operating in that same area. And it was a federal prosecutor, not a local judge, who decided that they would throw the book at them, charging them with terrorism. Terrorism. It's absolutely criminal what the federal government is doing.
They're on our list. If you'll go to the freedomcoalition.com, you'll see that the Hammonds are mentioned specifically on there, the land rights issue, the Bundy's situation, and then Cox and Kettler, which is a gun control issue in Kansas, and how Eric Holder came in and tried to teach Kansas that you might allow that, but we don't. And Cox actually made a suppressor for a rifle, and Kettler just bought one. That's all he did, is he bought one, as numerous law enforcement officers had in that same community. And yet both of them became felons for the rest of their lives. They didn't go to prison, but they're felons for the rest of their lives. And one of them is a disabled Marine, a handicapped Marine, and he was disabled in the war. And that's another thing I say. We have got to get out of Afghanistan. We've been there 16 years. None of my opponents are saying
Yes.
that. Does anybody even know why we're there anymore? 16 years in Afghanistan. How ridiculous. I
think I know why we're there. We're there for the lithium and the other things that they're going to put in batteries. But yeah, you're right. There is no definition of what winning means, and there is no end to this war.
No. And so Rand Paul and I totally agree on that issue. We're not the world's police. We're not supposed to be the world's police. And even John McCain cannot articulate why we're there anymore. He supports us being there. Ridiculous. And I tell everybody, this election comes down to one simple thing. You can elect a Tweedledee, Tweedledum, mainstream establishment Republican. Go ahead, vote for another John McCain Republican, or you can vote for a true blue Barry Goldwater Republican. Someone who will stand for the Constitution and stand for the principles of liberty upon which this country was founded. If you want that, if you want to make that clear choice, you have the opportunity in this race, District 8 Congress in Arizona.
That's a great analogy because, of course, both John McCain and Barry Goldwater came from Arizona. Real contrast there. But it is very imperative because, as you point out, we got Rand Paul. We got Walter Jones, congressman. They will speak out against these endless wars that don't have we don't even have a definition of what it means to win. So how can we possibly win? How can we ever be finished? Because we don't even know what we're fighting for. Yeah. But we need to have more people like you in Congress. If we're ever going to push this back, we can't do it with just one or two individuals in Congress. And it is so important. You know, right now we're coming up to primary season and people are taking a look at this. And that's really where you get your choices. But this is a special election coming up a week from tomorrow. Very important for people to support Sheriff Mack. You can find him on Twitter at Sheriff Mack. Also, his website is where you can contribute to the campaign and give them some money to run more radio ads in this final week, sheriffrichardmack.com. I'll give you the last couple of minutes, Sheriff Mack.
Well, you know, I just have gratitude in my heart for this process and for the people that are helping. And let me tell you, anybody who donates over $50, my wife and I will send you back a couple of Sheriff Mack bumper stickers. Those were those, you kind of had them across the screen at the top. Sheriff, I think it says Sheriff Mack or Sheriff Richard Mack for Congress. And yeah, that green up at the top, Sheriff Richard Mack. And then at the bottom of that, it'll say United States Congress. If you do donate over $50, we'll send you that back. I don't care how many people, we'll send them back to you. And thank you so much for having me. Thanks. My best to Alex. But here's to liberty.
Oh, absolutely. And you got a picture there of Ted Nugent. He's backing your campaign, right?
Well, he's backing me. He and I did a video back in the summer about these innocents in prison, about Sam Girard and the Hammonds and the Bundys. Mm-hmm. And that's a quote that he made on that video. He and I are good friends. We've done a lot of work together for freedom. And Larry Pratt, again, he has a comment about me. Judge Napolitano also about me and my Supreme Court case. But this is all about what we're going to do for freedom today and tomorrow. And everybody can join this cause no matter where you are. Anywhere in the country, you can donate, you can get behind this. And
absolutely.
We can all do it together. And thank you again, David, for having me.
Well, thank you, Sheriff Mack, and good luck to you. And again, if you want to contribute to this and actually help to get somebody in Congress who will walk the walk, who's already done it, not just paid lip service to the Constitution, but fought for the Second Amendment and the 10th Amendment all the way to the Supreme Court and fought, that's Sheriff Richard Mack. You can contribute at sheriffrichardmack.com. Thank you so much, and good luck to you, Sheriff. And joining us now is Sheriff Richard Mack, who appealed the constitutionality of the Brady Bill all the way to the Supreme Court and won against Bill Clinton. But Sheriff Mack is an author, speaker, former sheriff. He has served in a wide variety of roles over the course of his nearly 20-year career in law enforcement, which began in Provo, Utah. He has written several recent books, including The County Sheriff, America's Last Hope, and The Magic of Gun Control. And you can find him at CSPOA.com. That's Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers of America. Thank you for joining us, Sheriff Mack. Your comment about these gun control marches that are happening every hour. And of course, maybe you didn't hear, but Viacom is going to have all their different outlets like CBS and MTV, especially because they got to get those young kids. They're going to stop their programming at the top of every hour, 10 o'clock in every time zone across the country. They're going to have this parade of Marxist useful idiots out there.
Yeah, that really is a good term. Oh, by the way, it's cspoa.org.
.org, okay. All right, cspoa.org.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. I really appreciate being back with you. This whole thing has me so concerned, primarily because I'm a high school teacher right now. I'm also a former school resource officer, and so I've been around all of this. I've worked schools a great deal in my 20-year law enforcement career, and it has me so concerned what we're teaching our children in these schools. First of all, do they know the rule of law? Do they know the Constitution? Do they know the intent of the founders? Do they have any clue as to why the Second Amendment was established by our founders and how key and integral the Second Amendment is to American liberty?
Oh, that's a rhetorical question, isn't it? Obviously they don't, and they're parading their ignorance right now as we speak.
Well, I heard one high school student about a week and a half ago talk about how the preamble protected life. And he was actually making reference to the Declaration of Independence, and he was giving credit to that, to the preamble. My students in my school know the preamble, and they have it memorized to sign language. I'm really concerned that we have a bunch of ignorant students in Florida especially. Well, why wouldn't they? Because they have an ignorant governor.
That's right. Hang on, and we'll talk about what they did in Florida in terms of this Republican rhino. We'll be right back with Sheriff Mack. Stay with us. Welcome back. I'm David Knight, and we're talking to Sheriff Richard Mack. And again, you can find him at cspoa.org. That stands for Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers of America, cspoa.org. And I'm going to turn the mic over to Sheriff Mack because it took us a while to establish contact with him. So we've got one more segment. Sheriff Mack, you were just talking about the fact that the kids at the school that you're currently teaching at they understand the Constitution, but clearly these kids are being used as useful idiots. I've said in the past they're youthful idiots by the media, parading them on the hour, every hour across this country, and then surrendering the media to this pageant so they can take our guns away from us. That's not the case where you teach. You tell them about the Constitution.
Yes, and our whole school is dedicated to that. It's Heritage Academy in Arizona. But
okay, so that's a private school then, right? Is that?
It's a charter school.
Charter school.
So
there you go. So that's it. I mean, in public school, they're not going to hear that.
Right. Well, I'm afraid of that. And that seems to be the trend across the country. Well, so let's make sure that everyone understands government's role when it comes to the Second Amendment and the right to keep and bear arms. Government's only role in my right and your right to keep and bear arms is to guarantee that it is never infringed.
That's right.
Has anybody ever talked about that? And Governor Scott parading around the way he did in his pageantry, as you alluded to, and violating the law and claiming to be an NRA member while they're suing him for what he did. And he broke the law, and he should be removed from office, and he should resign because he has allowed the emotionalism of this horrible incident in Parkland to promote lawlessness and to break our Constitution and against his oath of office. He is a liar. He is a perjurer. He's committed perjury against the people of Florida who elected him to uphold and defend the Constitution, both of Florida and the United States.
And he was parroting what the Liberal Teachers Union, that has an agenda not to protect children, but to push gun control. They were saying, we don't want any teachers armed. Can't have that happen. We've only got to allow armed or uniformed people to carry arms. And the governor said the same thing. Oh, no, we can't have armed teachers. But that's absurd, especially when we look at what happened in Broward County, where we had the deputies told to stand down, and we had teachers who were willing to protect their students that they had there, and to protect them with their lives by just having nothing but their bodies to put between the kids and the attacker.
I've talked to a lot of teachers and students in school, and they really feel that people such as I, who have been in law enforcement 20 years, should be armed. And we also have a teacher, Dr. Mike, who was former special op in the military. So I have to ask the question to everyone: why would we not have arms available immediately? As soon as one of these incidents occurs, we call 911 and we want somebody there with a gun to stop it. We also know that most of these thug cowards that commit these heinous acts either kill themselves or stop shooting as soon as they hear or see somebody else coming with a gun to stop them.
That's right.
So
it's hit and run.
The obvious common sense and logic to this is have a gun there sooner. And the only way you're going to do that is have one strategically, or have some strategically placed in the school. I actually don't want to carry one on my person, but I do want them immediately available where no one knows they are. And there's lots of places to hide things in schools and still make them immediately available. But you know what? Now we're just talking about logistics. I still am so concerned that none of these students at these marches and none of these teachers know and understand the basic fundamental principles of American ideals and the rule of law and our Constitution, and specifically the Bill of Rights, and why the Founding Fathers put it in there. And for these teachers to participate in this kind of Hitleric propaganda just has me so worried and concerned about the direction of our country and the direction of our school system.
Well, of course, they know nothing about history. And these are people who are putting out a hashtag never again. If they knew anything about human nature, if they knew anything about history, which is the story of human nature, then they would know that never again didn't work after World War I. I mean, everybody said, we're never going to have that kind of a war again. It doesn't ever work. You have to do things. You're talking about logistical things. But let's talk about constitutional things again. Because we had Joe Biden and George H.W. Bush passed the Gun-Free School Zone Act and saying you can't have any guns anywhere in schools. But we had constitutional sheriffs 10 years ago in many states, Texas and other places. If you've got a good sheriff, the good sheriff comes in and says, no, we're going to have people, even if we got to make them officially deputies, we're going to have armed teachers in the school. So the sheriff at the local level or peace officers at the local level can overcome that unconstitutional infringement on people's right to protect themselves, or God-given right to protect themselves.
And David, I really want to make sure that people know that we, the people at the CSPOA and other people that work on our staff, are reaching out to the RNC to help them develop constitutional laws and policies regarding the right to keep and bear arms. And I'd really like to reach out to President Trump. President Trump, I'd love to work with you on this issue, where we don't violate what made America great, where we don't violate our Constitution and get so wrapped up in the emotionalism of these heinous incidents. I mean, it's just scary to me that we're willing to destroy this and destroy our only means of protection. And we've already had 22,000 gun control laws in this country. We've had waiting periods. We've had background checks. This has been happening. It's been a huge failure. The liberals and the people that you just mentioned, the president and Biden, who have established some of these stupid rules, these stupid laws, gun-free school zones. How's that worked out for everybody? Background checks.
It's worked as well as the drug-free school zones, right? We don't have drugs in our schools, and we don't have guns in our schools either, because we declared them to be free of that.
Yeah,
but it's kind of like what we've seen with Jeff Sessions saying there is no such thing as medical marijuana and there's no such thing as nullification. Well, there is such a thing as medical marijuana, and we've had 60% of the states come out and say, and we're going to nullify your federal laws prohibiting medical marijuana. So the answer lies, I think, I'll see if you agree. I think the answer lies with us at the local level saying we're going to nullify what's happening at the state level if it infringes on our rights, and we're going to nullify what happens at the federal level if it nullifies our rights. I'm not going to wait for President Trump to protect my kids. I'm going to elect a sheriff who will follow these procedures that we know are real because other sheriffs have been doing them for over decades to protect their students, and that is to allow the teachers who have been vetted, who have been trained, who have volunteered for this to carry arms, even if you have to deputize them.
That's absolutely correct. And we've been pushing that at the CSPOA, Constitutional Sheriff and Peace Officers Association. We've been pushing that there for 10 years, as you mentioned. And I've been pushing it way before then. My first book in 1994 was From My Cold Dead Fingers, Why America Needs Guns. And again, we'd love to have all of your listeners become members of the CSPOA. Help us with this effort. Help fund this effort. Just go to cspoa.org, become a member. Anybody and everybody can be a member and support the Constitutional Sheriff movement. It is at the local level. We will take America back, one county at a time, county by county, state by state, one sheriff at a time, one peace officer at a time, one defender of our Constitution at a time. And that's exactly what we teach there. Again, I want to reach out to President Trump. I'd love to work with you on these key issues. I don't think there's anybody more qualified than I in the entire country. A former retired sheriff, a former peace officer, a former resource officer, and a current teacher in public schools right now, charter school. And I'm very experienced in every one of these categories. So,
and of course, you also fought for the Second Amendment all the way up to the Supreme Court and won against unconstitutional laws.
I'm the only one sheriff in American history to start a lawsuit to save the Second Amendment and take it all the way to the Supreme Court and win. So, I mean, the credentials keep going, and I would love to help in any way I can. I think that Governor Scott is beyond help, but I think at the national level and also working with the county sheriffs, which I'm still doing. In fact, I'm meeting with a sheriff from New Mexico this Sunday. There's a lot of sheriffs reaching out to us to back them up on this issue. And David, you're absolutely correct. And I love InfoWars information going out there about that. The sheriffs can take back America and restore the Second Amendment. They really
absolutely. And anybody can join CSPOA.org. That's Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers of America. But you can join. You can help to spread the news that we can elect a sheriff who will help us and allow us to defend ourselves, to defend our children. All right, that's it for our show. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you, Sheriff Mack.
My name is Richard Mack, and I'm the former sheriff of Graham County, Arizona. The county sheriff is the only elected law enforcement officer in the United States, and certainly in his county. So he's the only official that reports directly to the power source. In other words, he's not a bureaucrat. He wasn't appointed by some other body. He reports directly to we, the people. And so he is sovereign in that regard because he reports directly to the other sovereigns. And that's why the sheriff is the ultimate authority. He's not a bureaucrat from Washington, D.C. The President of the United States cannot tell your sheriff what to do. And so certainly none of the other auxiliary departments underneath the President can tell the sheriff what to do, and that includes the IRS, the EPA, OSHA, FBI, DEA. Any of those agencies cannot tell the sheriff what to do. But when they're in his sovereign jurisdiction, he can tell them what to do. The question is, will he? It's really alarming how many peace officers, policemen, law enforcement officers, sheriffs, chiefs of police, who have actually taken an oath of office to uphold and defend, protect and preserve the United States Constitution. And then when you present them with that thought or idea that that's exactly what they should be doing, they claim that it isn't their job to uphold and defend the Constitution, that which they've already sworn an oath to do. And so that's what really I find very disturbing. but I think it's the evolution that has taken place in our country today, and also it's a result or a consequence or a branch of what's wrong with America. America is off track. We have replaced our Constitution, which was the bulwark of our freedom in this country, with political agendas, political selfishness, and ultimately political correctness has replaced our Constitution. And so is it any wonder that we're so far off track? And my message is law enforcement owns part of that problem, and we need to correct it. No, the governor and the sheriff are pretty much equal. The governor is the sovereign leader over the state. The sheriff would probably supersede the governor within his county because he is the ultimate protector of the people within his jurisdiction. He can't let anybody violate the Constitution in his county. He cannot allow anyone to violate the rights of the people within his jurisdiction. It doesn't matter if it's the governor or the president, the IRS, FBI. He is in charge of protecting the constitutional freedoms of his jurisdiction. The governor, yeah, oversees the state, and she is, or he, very powerful, and they are equal in some ways and have the same responsibility to the people who elect them, and that is to uphold and defend their Constitution. I was probably the first sheriff in the United States to sue the federal government for doing that very thing, for promulgating a bill or law or statute that directly commandeers the sheriff for federal bidding. As I look back, you know, I'm really grateful that we won a case at the United States Supreme Court, and I still have yet to see if, throughout American history, that there's been another case won at the Supreme Court by a sheriff, by a sitting sheriff. Sheriff Prince and I ended up taking this case all the way to the Supreme Court. We won on this very issue of state sovereignty, local autonomy, and the power of the county. And so when the or any other legislative body passes a law, a supposed law, that forces the sheriff to violate his oath of office to protect and defend the Constitution, what does he do? And Judge Roll, in my case, actually said that Sheriff Mack is thus forced to choose between keeping his oath or obeying the act. And I think he nailed it right on the head there. That's the key question. What does all of law enforcement and what do all the sheriffs across the country do when a statute forces them to violate their constitutional oath? Well, I think it's easy. You keep your word to your oath. That's the ultimate law. The supreme law of the land is the Constitution. Nothing supersedes the Constitution. So let's put it back in its proper place. And I would say there was a sheriff from Montana that did not join the lawsuit who I agree with. He did it the right way. He just said no. He said, we're not doing the Brady Bill in this county. And that was, I believe, Sheriff Nixon. And as I look back, I wish that that's what we had done. After looking back at my lawsuit and the subsequent victory in the U.S. Supreme Court, that I wish the sheriffs in Arizona had simply all signed a letter unitedly and sent it back to Washington, D.C., to the White House, and CC it over to the Congress and the Justice Department, letting them know we're not doing the Brady Bill in Arizona, and thank you very much for your efforts, but it won't be applied here. Yeah, that was a very powerful case, disavowed by the judge in the case, by the way, but it was a requirement of the settlement in the case that Sheriff Mattis devise a way to make sure that the federal government couldn't come in and do what they did to the Castañeda family, trying to arrest them. Well, they did arrest them at 1 o'clock in the morning for being illegal immigrants. And of course, nobody's trying to do that now when we have them all over the place, but the thing of it was, the Castañedas required that as part of their settlement. And Dave Mattis actually came up with the idea, and they were obeying it. The federal government was obeying it, and other counties in Wyoming also practiced the same policy. It wasn't a law, but it was a policy as established through a court order, or a court settlement, I should say. I don't believe they're doing it too much now. And so we've got a lot of work to do. Well, first thing I would love to see it be the county commissioners. The county commissioners should be supporting their sheriff with proper legislation or resolutions to have him enforce the Constitution. So if they pass a law saying, federal government, let's say they have this H.R. 45 that Barack Obama's trying to shove down our throats right now, to have a national registry for firearms and firearm owners in this country, and to have a national licensure granted from Washington, D.C. to keep and bear arms, which is already guaranteed in the Second Amendment. Let's say that that is really going to be pushed, and the federal government is going to come out and perhaps confiscate weapons and or ammunition. So what does the local authority do? Well, the county commission passes a resolution saying that there will be no more federal gun control in this county, and the sheriff enforces it. And so when the feds come in, the sheriff stands. He shouldn't need that resolution, but it would be nice to have it, because the Second Amendment is there, and he's already sworn, we're back to that again, he's already sworn an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights, of which the Second Amendment is a part, is a key integral part of the freedom as established by our founders. And why was the Second Amendment put there in the first place? Well, that's what we need to all understand. The intent of the Founding Fathers on the Second Amendment was so that the people of this country would have the final say in controlling their government. And the ultimate power of the Second Amendment is that the people remain in charge to be able to fight off abusive government. That's why the Second Amendment's there. So yeah, and the other one that really needs to back the sheriff in what's going on is the county attorney. It's not essential to have those others. The sheriff can do it on his own. He doesn't need to ask permission of anybody in the county or across the country. He doesn't need to ask the barber down on Main Street or anyone else how he's going to keep his oath of office. He's bound by his word, and he's also bound by the Constitution. Department of Homeland Security should have absolutely nothing to do with your sheriff's office. Absolutely, let me say that again, absolutely nothing, okay? Homeland Security has just been around for a few years, since 9/11, of course, and right now we have Janet Napolitano, who used to be the governor of Arizona, saying that veterans and people who believe in Ron Paul and people who believe in the Constitution and people who believe in the Bible and who believe in gun rights are all dangerous and pose some sort of danger to the federal government. Well, I guess she might be right. If the government's out of control and tyrannical and abusive, well, yeah, then she ought to be worrying, I guess. But otherwise, these people and those groups are extremely peaceful. And she even mentioned, I think, the libertarians, which all libertarians have to swear an oath of non-aggression and non-violence. So how did they make that list? The sheriff shouldn't be taking money from the feds in the first place, and then they don't have to worry about that. And if the states would wake the heck up, and I really do mean wake the heck up, if they would stop sending our money to Washington, D.C., then Washington, D.C. won't have our money to hold over us anymore. So it's just, I don't know, maybe it's all too simple, but federal government doesn't create money, they take money. And they take money from the states and from the people. So why do the states sit here and worry about every $10 they send to Washington, D.C., they get $1 back? Well, keep your $10 and you won't have to worry about any of that. Yeah? Well, the citizens are the boss of the sheriff, and so they need to let the sheriff know what they want him to do. Even then, if 99.9% of the people in his county ask him to violate the Constitution, he can't do it. No matter what, he has to keep his word. This is not a democracy. In a democracy, that would be okay. The rule of the majority would win out. That's democracy. In a constitutional republic, the rights of the individual, even if it's just one person in his county, must be protected. And so the people form, the M word, the militia, or the posse. And if you look up the word militia in the dictionary, Google the definition of militia. It's the same thing as the local posse, which the sheriff has had the power to call out the people and actually order the people to come out in helping him in the execution of the law and keeping the peace. And that's where the people really come out. Back to your question about how can citizens support their sheriffs. Well, he works for you. You've got to read this and then take it to him and say, you know what? There was a sheriff who sued the federal government and won a case on the issue of states' rights. We'd like you to consider this. And it's only 50 pages, so he can read this while he eats a donut. Yeah.
Did you see that?
Hey, I was in law enforcement 20 years, I know. The MIAC report was absolutely absurd. Anyone thinking that that's okay has got a screw loose somewhere, and they call us crazy. Well, we mean no other individual on the face of the planet any harm. This is a peaceful movement. This is a movement to restore our Constitution, yes, and we will stand fast in that, and we're not going to move backward for anybody. But we mean no harm to absolutely anyone else. We don't want to hurt anybody. We certainly don't want a fight or a war or anything of that nature, but we're not giving up our guns, and we're not giving up our ammunition, and we're not giving up our children, and we're not giving up our religions, and we're certainly not going to give up any more of our freedom and liberty. And if you really study what's going on in our country, you'll come face to face with the conclusion that I put also in the book, The County Sheriff, America's Last Hope, the best book on the planet right now about freedom, that every citizen in this country should read.
I agree.
The bottom line of this whole book is that it presents this thesis of the book that the greatest threat to constitutional, God-given American liberty is our own federal government. The worst thing that can happen in this country is for a county sheriff to be corrupt. They're really hard to remove, and because he is corrupt, he has lots of people in his pocket, or he's in other people's pockets. I don't think that happens an awful lot, but I know for a fact that it does happen and is happening now. So some states don't even have recall laws. The only way he can be removed in some states if you convict him of a felony. Well, that's happened a few times. There are recall laws, and I suggest people use them, or you find a place to live with a sheriff who is honest and keeps his oath of office. But to the sheriffs who are corrupt, luckily it's a small percentage. But what we need all sheriffs to do is to come to the realization that the oath of office is their ultimate goal and purpose and duty. And if you're just going to take the oath as a ceremony to get your picture in the paper at the beginning of your term, then you've violated the Constitution, and you've violated your oath of office, and you've violated the trust of the people. A recall is just a signature drive where people in the county sign a petition to have another election. And the sheriff still is on that ballot, or any other corrupt elected official is still on that ballot, but it puts them up for another election in and gives the people another chance to kick them out. The Real ID Act is one of many coming out down the pike in Washington, D.C. Let's go back a little bit too to the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment does bestow, without question, and it would take any high school student maybe 5 minutes to find the intent of the Founding Fathers. They would have to try to go find it because they're not taught the Second Amendment and from the intent of the Founding Fathers in schools. I've been a government teacher in high school before, and I know it does not teach the truth. Most of the government books in this country school system do not teach the truth about our foundation or about our government or about the Founding Fathers. But there's a lot of information out there and you can find it. But the federal government's trying to force more gun control down our throats. They're trying to force this national ID down our throats. That's going to have also a part to play with gun control. And I simply don't trust any of it. But the overall socialistic agenda that is saturating Washington, D.C. politics right now, it's all unconstitutional. Government is not here to feed us, to clothe us, to take care of us, to educate us, to basically take care of us. And let me warn you, friends, if you want the federal government to take care of you, they will. And that should scare you to death. But the National ID Act, all that stuff, H.R. 45, the bottom line is that there's already about 22,000 gun control laws in this country, all of which are unconstitutional. Every one of them. The people have the right to keep and bear arms, and what gun I own, and how I get it, and how much ammo I have, or how many guns I have. Guess what? I don't want to be rude here, but it's none of your business, and it certainly is none of my government's business. The sheriff can refuse any order or policy or suggestion or law or anything else from Washington, D.C. or from the state capitol if it violates the rights of the people. He is the ultimate check and balance, and he usually has a gun. Freedom of the press, freedom, free speech, it's all combined together. And a lot of times these same groups that have been attacked are the ones that are the most vocal. So that's why Janet Napolitano's coming after them, because they have to label you as something so people won't listen to you. And of course, who jumps on board on that attack? Well, it's usually ABC and CBS and NBC and CNN and what are these government-owned media outlets? The reason that we have freedom of the press is not so we can read about LeBron James in the sports page of the newspaper. It's so that the press actually is a check and balance against overzealous government also, to make sure that the people will always hear the truth about what's really going on. Well, that's not happening anymore.